I've been in and around state budgeting for many years, and federal funds, initially were a kind of side conversation. They were very agency specific, they were very programmatic, and they were very regular. And over the last number of years, they've become much more a focus for overall state financial talk and budgeting. And this presentation and this discussion is an important extension of that. What we're seeing, as we saw last session as an example, the timing is significant to the decisions, the amounts are significant to the opportunities for the state, and there's also an uncertainty as to exactly what's going to happen. And that was true in some of the ARPA funds that we managed last year, and it is sort of the core of the IIJA, where we're responding to another set of information. Normally, the Department of Management and Budget puts out the forecast, and we have sort of our set of facts. We don't do that for the federal government. They have their own facts. So I just appreciate this conversation, a chance to walk through our understanding at this point in time, and work together to figure out how to manage federal opportunities and maximize the opportunities for Minnesotans.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. State Director Minge.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Anna Minge, State Budget Director with Minnesota Management and Budget. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you all this morning on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that recently passed at the federal level. It's really a historic opportunity for the state of Minnesota, and we're excited to update you all on what state agencies have been doing to plan and prepare for the use of these funds, as well as some of the risks and uncertainties and opportunities to partner in how we manage this work going forward. So today, my presentation is going to focus on an overview of the IIJA.
Director Minge, can you pull just a little bit closer to and pull it down? Yeah, perhaps. There we go. That might help. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this better? Great. So my presentation today, I'll start with a high-level overview of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA, in Minnesota. We'll discuss the matching funds that are required to unlock these federal dollars and how they're represented in the governor's budget recommendations. And then we'll discuss some of the uncertainty that remains about the implementation of this law in the state and leave time for questions. As you mentioned, Madam Chair, there are representatives from other state agencies here as well. Mr. Conaderud-Hubinger from the Department of Transportation, as well as Mr. Kelly from the Department of Commerce, are here to answer more specific questions related to their programmatic dollars. So moving to this, the first sort of content slide, the IIJA provides $1.2 trillion over 5 years from federal fiscal years 2022 through 2026. The federal law is essentially two different omnibus bills packaged into one. So it's roughly $650 million of it includes the reauthorization of the Federal Surface Transportation Act. And that's represented by the largest share of the chart, that blue slice of the pie. And the remaining nearly $550 million funds general infrastructure investments that focus on roads and bridges, transit, water, energy, climate resiliency, and adaptation, and broadband. So what's important to understand about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is that it contains both formula grants that are awarded to states based on formulas outlined within the law or within previous law, and it contains a number of competitive or discretionary programs. So looking first at those formula programs, this is the area where we have the most certainty about what Minnesota can expect and the requirements around those dollars. And in that space, it's a combination of both ongoing funding, funds that have previously been authorized but are being continued, and some new dollars. But the bill also includes significant numbers of competitive grants, and that's a space where there is less certainty for states because we need to determine what programs we want to pursue, and the guidance in many cases is still unavailable. According to FFIS, or federal funds information for states, Minnesota expects to receive about $7.4 billion in those competitive funds. And moving to the next slide, we can see how that looks across state agencies. So this chart is based on the most recent estimates from FFIS, which detail the formula allocations that Minnesota is expected to receive. In total, we expect that Minnesota will receive $7.4 billion, but of that, about $2.2 billion is new funding and incremental above sort of current levels. And the vast majority of that funding will flow through the Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Council, and the Public Facilities Authority. So you can see on this chart on the left, it really illustrates the IIJA's focus on transportation. And I'm not going to go into detail about all of the specific programs, but obviously MnDOT will play a leading role in the state's implementation, which is part of why they'll be following with a presentation of their own. But funding for transit is also included, and water infrastructure. Among other highlights, the IIJA directs $76 million to Minnesota for weatherization assistance at the Department of Commerce, over $100 million for broadband development, and nearly $18 million for state and local cybersecurity enhancements. Now, moving to the chart on the right, that 7.4 in the formula allocation, so we're not talking about those competitive grants, about 84% of those dollars require some form of state match. And I'll discuss this shortly, but for all those places where we know there was a required state match, there is a corresponding request for funds in the governor's supplemental or capital budget recommendations. So we wanted to give you all an idea of the work that's going on at state agencies to prepare for and implement this legislation so far. There are a number of examples listed on this slide, but as you can see, M&B and the governor's office are coordinating across agencies on all IIJA programs. There are many more examples that could be added to the summary you see here, such as the water infrastructure state revolving loan programs administered at PFA, the cybersecurity grants being led by Minute and DPS, or a new hydrogen hubs program that's being developed at the federal level, for which Commerce has provided comments to the federal government's recent request for information. M&B has worked with agencies to make sure the state is positioned to move quickly once funding is received. A number of IIJA programs have already received spending authority through a recent submission to the Legislative Advisory Commission. And having that spending authority means that we'll be able to move quickly once all of the relevant pieces are in place. So moving on, the next set of slides describe those required federal matches of which we're aware and how they are represented in the governor's budget. So this sort of moving through, the first line in this table represents the increased funding for roads and bridges in the IIJA. We anticipate $4.5 billion in total for roads and $302 million in new funding for bridges, and this is over a 5-year period. The anticipated state match is $113 million a year, of which a portion is for formula-driven programs and a portion is an estimate for those competitive or discretionary grant programs. And the governor's budget provides funding through the multimodal transportation package proposal. There's funding for transit, which is also included in the multimodal transportation package, water funds, which are included in the governor's capital budget recommendations to the Public Facilities Authority, and funding for airports within the state, which are also in the transportation package. On the next slide, you'll see $100 million for broadband programming. The governor's budget recommendation doesn't include a match for broadband because although we anticipate a match requirement to unlock the federal funds, we anticipate that the sub-grantees for those programs would provide the required match. And then the last item on this slide is funding for EV charging infrastructure. And there are a number of EV charging related provisions in the governor's budget. There is an item in the capital budget, which will serve as the state's source for the non-federal share of those formula allocations. And there are a number of items there are a couple other budget items that would be used as match for some competitive grant opportunities. So in the climate space, the governor's budget includes two provisions. One at the Department of Transportation to maximize federal transportation climate funding, and one at the Department of Commerce, the State Competitiveness Fund. And these would be used to apply for, at the Department of Transportation to provide match for competitive discretionary programs to reduce climate through the transportation sector. And the State Competitiveness Fund, the governor's recommending $20 million. This funding would leverage energy-related competitive federal grant opportunities through the IIJA, as well as anticipated Reconciliation Act. The state dollars would provide for those matches, would increase access by smaller rural utilities, universities, and nonprofits who wish to apply for or partner with the state in order to access some of those competitive energy-related opportunities. The governor's budget also includes funding for Minge to provide the state funding necessary to match the cybersecurity funding in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That's $4.125 million. It's expected that 80% of the total funding would be used on projects supporting cybersecurity improvements for local governments, while the remaining 20% would be available to Minge for use towards state cybersecurity initiatives. So this next slide really just summarizes all of those items that we just walked through. It's a sort of a change item view of the governor's recommendations that include matching funds for the IIJA programs. Many of these budget items, such as those at PFA and MPCA, are intended to provide matching funds for IIJA programs as well as spending increases for agency programs and grants. Across the 2022 capital and supplemental budgets, the governor is recommending roughly $392 million in fiscal years 2022 and 2023, and $400 million in 2024 and 25 in new state investments that will leverage federal resources. So moving on, we'd like to discuss with you some of the uncertainty that we're encountering as we work through and continue to plan for the competitive grant opportunities in the federal law. So there are a number of unknowns for the state of Minnesota. I think the magnitude of this law and the complexity really can't be understated. There are approximately 380 separate programs in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We know that about half of these opportunities are available to states, but we can't be confident that only those number are, because we're still waiting on guidance for many programs to understand who those eligible applicants might be. And that guidance is really coming out on a rolling basis. We expect that about 1/3 of IIJA programs will publish guidance and or open to applicants before the legislature convenes in 2023. There are also many funding opportunities for other entities that could benefit the state of Minnesota, but for which the state may not be an eligible applicant, such as funds for local governments, federally recognized tribes, the Army Corps, or the Forest Service. So the next slide really illustrates that timing challenge, which we have not so eloquently referred to as the donut hole internally at MMB. So I've walked through the recommendations that the governor has included in the supplemental budget and the capital budget to provide matching funds where we know they are required, and even to attempt to anticipate places where we think they will be required. And then moving to the bottom of that graphic, we expect that agencies will submit budget requests to provide matching funds in future budget submissions to the legislature, because the implementation of this federal law is really is ongoing for a number of years. And as you are all aware, the agencies come to the legislature with requests for matching dollars on federal grants regularly over time. But the challenge that we are encountering is that applications for over 100 grant programs we anticipate will open before the legislature convenes in January of 2023. The total of what we know is that the total for those grant programs is around $50 billion once you exclude transportation and transit funds, because those are already anticipated in the request from the Department of Transportation. If you did a very rough analysis, which is really all we can do at this time, and you assume that Minnesota were to receive 2% of that $52 billion, that would be at about $1 billion of federal grants to the state of Minnesota. And if from there you assumed the matching requirement was 20%, that would mean that we would need roughly $200 million in matching fund for those opportunities. But that being said, I recognize that that is a large number and think it's important to provide a number of caveats. We don't know that these funds would be awarded all at one time versus in 2, 3, or 4 grant rounds. We also don't know that just because an application period were to open in the fall of 2022, that it would necessarily close before the legislature had a chance to appropriate funds. But I wanted to give you all a sense of the level of uncertainty and the magnitude of what we could be facing. Yep. So, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Okay. So this slide provides a few examples of the programs opening during that legislative interim. We expect items like the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, the Dam Safety Program. I'm not going to walk through the whole list, but items like the State Forest Action Plan are anticipated to open this fall, and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The timing is unknown, but we have reason to believe it will open before next January. And so there are a number of ways we could attempt to address that uncertainty, but there is really a question of of risk tolerance and how competitive we want to make state applications during this interim, because another dynamic is that sometimes there may be a minimum level of state match, but providing additional match would make us more competitive against other applicants. So with that, Madam Chair, that is sort of the end of my prepared remarks, but I'm really happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We'll open for questions, but I do want to maybe just make a clarification from you, Director Minge. What does open mean? Does that mean you have to have the appropriation available before you can apply?
Madam Chair, members, it's really not, it's not clear. So we anticipate there will be places where if the state didn't have funds appropriated, we would at the very least be less competitive, because it wouldn't be guaranteed that those funds were actually available to state agencies when the application was being submitted.
Okay, very good. Okay, questions? Senator Kent?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have a short series of questions that I hope are each short, but it kind of leads to each other. So first of all, Director Minge, and thank you for all this really helpful information. Is it true that some of these grants have already closed?
Director Minge?
Madam Chair, Senator Kent, I believe that's the case. I know some have been released with really quick turnaround. So we expect, for example, some Met Council, like sort of being open and closing within, this month. And so that's another challenge, is that some of those windows are pretty short.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kent?
That's helpful. And just to make sure I'm understanding, looking at slide 7, under the category roads and bridges, the state match, the second bullet point, 53 million for competitive programs, and you described that as an estimate. And to make sure I'm understanding, so when you say estimate, does that mean, like, is that 53 million that there is a national pot, and if we just did that on a prorated basis, Minnesota would get 53 million, but then if we are extra competitive, we could get more than 53 million?
Director Minge.
Madam Chair, Senator Kent, yes, that's true. So that estimate was developed by MnDOT based on a sort of proration of what we expect and some assumptions about how those grant funds will be released. But there are a lot of programs that estimate is intended to cover, and for some we may receive more, and some we may receive less. One thing I would note as we talk about the need, that portion of the transportation provision, it really is intended to serve as a match for a very wide range of programs. And so to the extent it's available to the agency on a flexible basis, that would be much more advantageous to the state's applications versus sort of a prescriptive appropriation to which programs it can be used for match.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate that clarification, and I imagine that is true. I was using the roads and bridges one as an example, but I'm sure that's the case for these other areas as well. And Madam Chair, we always like to manage and maximize our federal opportunities. We would much rather have these dollars come to Minnesota than, say, Utah or Texas or someplace else. And it is a source of frustration, I think, to a lot of us that, just on an overall basis, that Minnesota puts in more than we take back out from the federal government. So as I'm listening to this conversation about the timing and that these things are sort of blinking on and off in a fairly unpredictable way, I'm kind of having flashbacks to 2020 and the need to be responsive and react, and to be able to manage this quickly. And it just, makes me wonder if we need to make sure that we have the resources, the plan, the mechanisms, the pool of funds available so that we can respond to this on a timely basis and not miss out on important opportunities. So just, that was a little alarm bell going off in my head, and I know you and I sat through a lot of meetings and briefings about that. And we won't have special sessions every 30 days this year.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, Senator Kent, that's a great comment, and that was one of my questions is what is happening in the governor's office on that very issue? Is there somebody that's going to be a point guard on all these funds that has been designated, and the correspondence with us to make sure that we're responding to as much as we need to be. So at some point, you can answer the question on what is happening in the governor's cabinet, if there's going to be a separate IIJA czar.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I can't speak for the governor's office and their future plans, but I do know they haven't ruled out bringing on added capacity in addition to the governor's existing staff who've been working on this, as well as the M&B staff who've been brought on in sort of a project management role. Over the last couple of months, the administration has really been working hard to coordinate across agencies to better understand these hundreds of opportunities. In particular, unlike a lot of the funding at MnDOT, which is reauthorization, the areas that have required a lot more attention and coordination are some of these competitive grant opportunities we've been discussing. So the governor's office is working really closely with M&B and relevant agencies to review those hundreds of programs to make sure we understand where Minnesota qualifies and what we need to do to apply. So it's possible that the administration will want to add additional capacity, but I can't speak for the governor.
Okay, very good. We have Senator France, Senator Kiffmeyer, and Senator Marty. Senator France, Senator Newman.
First of all, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Minge. I want to quickly say, Senator Rosen, thank you for inviting the ranking minority members for energy, bonding, and transportation. This is exactly what we should be doing, and you deserve credit for getting us together this morning. Director Minge, nice to see you and meet you today. I heard maximize opportunities, I heard historic opportunities, and I heard move quickly. And I just want to emphasize from the constituents that we hear from, and that includes greater Minnesota, you're singing exactly from the same song sheet. I did want to touch on the question of Azar, Senator Rosen. We've had input from the clean energy industry, and that includes some of the stuff we're talking about here with climate and electric vehicles. I'm an advocate for let's go on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, so the opportunity for Minnesota to compete for some of these competitive grants sort of meets with the truth that some of the smaller communities don't have the grant writing capacity. And so this is just one of 201 legislators, Senator Rosen and Director Minge, saying, I think there's some value in looking at Azar, even though that particular term doesn't suit me.
Yeah, no, doesn't me either, actually.
Potato, Senator Rosen. But my point would be this. If we had someone whose job it was to go around to the smaller communities in Minnesota and make sure they knew about some of this, even if they didn't have the grant writing capacity, if we had someone whose job it was to make it known to Minnesotans, hey, we're going to be competing with Washington, New Jersey, California for these funds, I think there's a lot of Minnesotans who, and this includes, cities, communities, who might say, oh, hey, that's a good idea, we have this opportunity. And, I obviously don't mean to be advocating too strongly. I know the governor's got some other stuff up there, but if you see him, say, hey, I think Senator Friends thought Azar might be a good idea. Fair enough?
Madam Chair, Senator
Director
Friends.
Minge.
Yeah, we think that's helpful perspective, and we can certainly add that into our conversations with the governor's office.
Thank you, Senator Fritz. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go to, thank you, by the way, for being here in the presentation. Appreciate it very much. I'd like to go to slide 3 and 4. And on slide 3, it's formula grants expected to receive $7.4 billion, combination of ongoing and new funding. And so this is the sum total of all the possible things. So what is the ongoing and what is the new in order to come up with the 7.4?
Director Minge.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, so of the $7.4 billion, $2.2 billion is incrementally new funding, and then so the 5.2 would be the ongoing funding.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of expected that, but I went from one slide to the next slide, and I didn't want to just assume. And so that $2.2 billion, of that, 84% is a no match required. That's what that pie chart shows, 84%. Oh, let's see, I don't have these in color, it's in black and white. So it's the opposite of that?
Madam Chair,
Director
Senator, yeah, so it's 84% require a match. I'm sorry for the color, but the larger slice of the pie is the match required, and the smaller slice is the no match.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's what I was trying to understand here. So 84% require a match, and then there's all of these other kinds of areas. IIJA is definitely broader than we always think of as prime, and it is primarily roads and bridges, but the water, the airports, other things in it as well. I think, Madam Chair, I think the issue here is, in many cases, the state match, but also on the slides it says guidance released on rolling basis. So that makes it extremely difficult to even provide a match is one thing, but to even know with guidance on a rolling basis. So that's a very difficult situation. But nonetheless, I think that what we have going on right now, I think just getting a handle on it and understanding the what is very, very helpful. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the presentation as well. Just a couple of comments. One, I mean, everything is so uncertain and moving quickly, and some may be moving slowly, but the uncertainty is so challenging, I'm sure, for everyone involved, and I'm glad MMB is tracking this. I'll agree with Senator Friends' comment that the idea that somebody, either MMB or in the governor's office or somewhere, is out there trying to reach out to other partners in the state, local governments and so on, that might be able to qualify, make sure they're aware of it as much as possible. I think that would be helpful. But the other one, I think it was something that Senator Kent said earlier too, and that is that maybe we that given the timing, the challenge of the timing for some of the grants that are coming up this spring and fall, this summer and fall, is somehow or another to prepare, whether it's a pool of funds or something that can be set aside to deal with these. Obviously, what I'm hearing from Director Minge is that a lot of these may not be coming up right away. They may not have to be responded to right away. They may not something else. But it seems to me if we have a pool of funds that can be accessed somehow in order to make the match happen in a timely basis to maximize their opportunity, I think that would be a helpful thing for the budget negotiators and the administration, everybody to be thinking about in the coming weeks, because once we're gone, yes, as you mentioned, we're hoping not to be back for special sessions. It would be very helpful if there was some way that we could not lose funds because we're not in session. So I think that's something I'd like to second.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Newman, we do have the Chief Financial Officer of MnDOT coming up. I'm not sure if you'd like to keep your conversation, if it's general or if it's transportation, because we do have a further presentation on transportation, so.
My question, Madam Chair, is really general.
Okay, wonderful. Senator Newman.
Yeah. Commissioner, I have more questions than could possibly be addressed in this hearing, although I sincerely appreciate that you came in and talked to us. My greatest fear, and I've never in my legislative career dealt with a bill like Iija. My greatest fear is the unknown, what I don't know. And I don't understand yet the deadlines, the standards for applying for grants, all of those unknowns that have just been outlined. I'd like to ask for an accommodation, and you can turn me down if you wish. I would very much like, because transportation is such a large portion of this, I would very much appreciate it if you could give me a point person that could sit down with me and my staff and help me understand the unknown. Because what I fear is I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss a deadline. I'm going to miss, as Senator Kent was talking about, leave some money on the table that is inadvertent. I would also indicate that the minority lead in transportation is unavailable today for a very legitimate reason. He can't be here. And I would like the minority lead in transportation to be involved in this. So my request is, time is short. My request would be could you give us a point person? I mean, you don't have to show up, Commissioner. But could you give us a point, Commissioner, or if you want to come, that'd be great. But give us somebody to sit down one-on-one and talk to some of the folks in the transportation arena and help us understand. Because, as I said, there's many more questions that I have that I can possibly address in this meeting. Although I really appreciate, Madam Chair, that you've done this. Your thoughts, Commissioner?
Commissioner Showalter.
Chair Rosen, Senator, I appreciate the request, and of course, we would be happy to follow up and work with you and the minority lead. I just want to balance expectations because on the one hand, we, as the budget director mentioned, we don't actually have all the answers. We are looking into uncertainty just like you are, and no amount of conversation is likely to resolve that because the answers aren't available yet. I think the other thing is that it is really important for our partners at the Department of Transportation to be there as well, because really they have a long-running experience with their the federal counterparts and are going to have a better insight and probably fresher information as to what are some of those risks and some of those particular concerns that you might have. But it is a new area for us. We're kind of patching it together, and but absolutely, we would be happy to follow up. Sure, if you want to.
Madam Chair.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Commissioner. And what I will do then is I'll get a hold of your office and accept any recommendation that you have in terms of who to talk to and set up an appointment for next week. And again, I would really appreciate it because I am literally afraid of what I don't know. And I know you don't have all the answers, or your agency doesn't have all the answers either, but at least we'll go into this blindly together. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator Newman. To this point, Senator Friends.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To this point, and thank you, Senator Newman. I think that's kind of what I'm asking in the energy sector, Department of Commerce proposal. You know, can we have someone we can talk to, the chair, the ranking member? And so I echo my colleagues' comments and say if we're, transportation may be the larger share, but the spirit of that kind of guidance is the same. And I wanted to add one other comment, if I could, Madam Chair. I talked a little bit about how czar might go around the state and inform some of these potential partners about how to compete for these grants. But Director Minge, you can probably appreciate too that the other part of that would be someone who could provide technical support. Let's say there's a community in my district that says, hey, we're interested in that. Someone that they could call and say, okay, we maybe don't write a bunch of grants, and then the implementation of the grants. Just some thought that it runs the spectrum. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Newman.
Exactly, Senator Friends. Who are the other partners that this person needs to collaborate with, too? That, I think, would be really important. And we do have Mr. Natrud Hubicher, the CFO for MnDOT. Any comments on this particular issue? Mr. Hubicher, definitely get the microphone. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just echo what Commissioner Showalter said. MnDOT would be happy to be at the table for that meeting, Senator Newman, provide any insight we do have so we can be, again, blind together, as you said.
So I do have a comment that Mr. Nauman is shared with me that I'd like to share with you. It's from our Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. He states, reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones. So, thank you. Mr. Nauman. Senator Sinjum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That quote gives us hope, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it gives you pause, for sure.
Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I just have a couple of questions. I certainly, I echo this whole idea about accommodations, and certainly Commissioner Arnold, I know, is at least my beck and call with respect to energy, and I certainly appreciate and respect that. Just a couple of questions that are in areas that I don't see on the list, which do bother me a little bit, and maybe I just missed it, but transmission is a big deal in Minnesota right now in terms of getting electricity to market, and I didn't see any mention of that in anything that the governor seems to be seeking. And so the question is, in the area of, and I'll just add weatherization as well, although we've talked a lot about weatherization. I'm kind of surprised that I don't see anything here, but maybe it's hidden away in one of these categories and I don't see it specifically. Could you, those two especially, could you help me with those?
Director Minge.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Sinjum, so first to the weatherization question, so on slide 4, where it's sort of the slide with two pie charts, weatherization is the $92 million going to the Department of Commerce, but it's not highlighted because it's not, it doesn't have the same, like the matching challenge
Okay.
that we do in other spaces.
So, Madam Chair, could I just interrupt? So,
Senator Sinjum.
so we can just assume that that 92 million is coming, right? Or do we have to pursue it with any match? No match?
Director Minge.
So, Madam Chair, those, we can, that's a formula allocation that we can assume is coming. And so I think that the Department of Commerce is here and can speak to the program more specifically
Okay.
if interested, but I think there's no match required, and I will let Mr. Kelly clarify if I'm misstating.
And, other people have questions too. We don't need to tie up this, but my real question, Madam Chair, is, so we got the formula, but are there opportunities for more weatherization money?
Please
Madam-
introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, my name is John Kelly. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. The number that we got a bit of a haircut from the feds on weatherization when they came up with how they were allocating the funds. It's actually $76 million. They, for some reason, are highlighting the warmer weather states. And so we're getting less than we initially anticipated. I think that, there are opportunities that are currently happening where there is increased opportunity with, not from IAJA, but from the other coronavirus relief plans where there is more weatherization dollars. But this IAJA money right now is a formula to the state, 76 million. It's not, there isn't a competitive thing here. Where we are focusing to your question about the grid and other opportunities in energy, as you know, as we presented in your committee, Mr. Chairman, is the $20 million that's in one of the slides here for State Competitiveness Fund. We see that as a energy specific, but in the same kind of concept, bridge to the budget year. And so we are trying to put in place an advisory board that would be appointed with members from the legislature, with experts, with higher ed, with the administration, that would be able to not only review these applications as they come in, but be able to come in with that interim matching funds, not just for the state of Minnesota, but for local governments. Also included in that and contemplated in that is the what was talked about, and I think very timely and important conversation about. It's not just about the person going around and talking about the opportunities, but we anticipate trying with those funds to try to hire grant writing staff to support local governments who just don't have the bandwidth for this. And so, or the experience. So it's a kind of a getting ready, getting this in place, and then we anticipate, it's $20 million. We know it'll probably be higher than that, but getting to the budget year, hopefully we have a better sight picture for the policymakers here on this panel and in the broader legislature, and then coming back. But we're trying to make sure that we don't miss out on these opportunities. And we're hearing from both, large and small utilities, business across the state that are really looking forward to trying to secure some of those opportunities. And that comes to grid, and the hydrogen hub conversations that are happening, all of that. I'll stop there.
Senator St. John.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'll defer to other questions, but that 20 million is important. We obviously didn't have it on our target, but we have 5 weeks left or 4, so I think there's more to talk about there.
So yesterday when your bill was up at Senator St. John, I did ask nonpartisan staff what there was available for weatherization from the feds, and a number of 114 million was given to me. Is there any more? Is there any other pots of money that would account for that figure?
Madam Chair and members, the 114 million was our estimate that we were going to get from the federal government. And then when we actually got the formula, we got, as I said, a bit of a haircut from the feds as they focused on the warmer weather states. And so we're getting $76 million.
How dare they? I mean, really.
Madam Chair, thank you. There's
Thank you,
other
Senator.
questioners, so I defer to them.
Absolutely. Are there further questions for energy at this point? I don't see any, but so, Mr. Natrud Hubinger, you have a slideshow. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I believe it will be brought up virtually if Liz is out there.
Really hug that microphone too, Mr. Hubinger. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And apologies for before. For the record, my name is Josh Knatter-Hubinger. I'm serving currently as the interim CFO at MnDOT. For future questions, to save the committee time, KH is perfectly fine.
Okay.
So I'm here to
That's funny.
I am here to give a brief update on the MnDOT portion of IIJA. So if you can go to the next slide, please. You will hear very similar themes as Director Minge for the transportation portion. So just a quick refresher, IIJA, the 5-year authorization was signed back in November, but not the annual appropriations bill was not signed into law until March. And so we're really learning things essentially real time for what's happening in the bill. And then as mentioned, there are a lot of competitive grants. And so we are in the midst of a couple that are out there already. We have seen 4 or 5 notice of funding opportunities already roll out. There's also quite a few coming up over the next couple months that I'll touch on in a couple slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, just for transportation, so this is transportation for MnDOT. So this does not include the portions going to Met Council as an example. But you can see again, to kind of set a framework, the new bill includes existing kind of ongoing funding. That's what's on the left. And then on the right, you can see those bars at the very top. Those are the incremental new pieces in this bill. Translates to about a 30% increase over our baseline funding. And it's made up of about a 20% increase in existing programs. And then there are 4 completely new programs in this bill. So those are highlighted at the very top. There's a program specifically for carbon reduction. That's about $100 million over the 5 years. There's a program called Protect, focused on resiliency. That's also around $100 million over the 5 years. There's a new dedicated bridge program, about $300 million over the next 5 years. And then an electric vehicle infrastructure program, about $68 million over the next 5 years. And those amounts are all the amounts going to Minnesota of that larger bill. Next slide, please. So just going into detail, so again, the money is coming to us in both formula funds and discretionary funds. So I will hit the formula portions first. So looking at just roads and bridges, it's about $240 million each year of new money. Again, that's about a 35% increase over our baseline funding. If you look at our historical precedent, about 70% of those federal funds for roads and bridges come to MnDOT for projects on the trunk highway system. That translates to $170 million each year. And then about 30% flows to our local partners for projects off the trunk highway system. So county state aid highways, municipal state aid streets, et cetera. That's about $70 million. As Director Minge mentioned, these come with match requirements. Assuming the typical 80-20 split, that translates to about a $40 million need for state match for the trunk highway portion of the new money, and about $20 million for the local system. So again, about $60 million of matching needs for those formula funds. Next slide, please. So now kind of looking at all the modes on one slide. These amounts are all the new amounts in the bill by year for each of the modes. And again, this is just MnDOT. So especially for that FTA for transit, this is just the new money to MnDOT. This does not include Met Council. So again, those first 2 lines, you can see those same numbers from the previous slide, about $240 million of new money coming for roads and bridges. I will highlight one significant outstanding issue there. For the most part, authorization to spend federal funds comes via that LAC process. And so we do have authority to spend those IIJA funds for the FAA federal money and the FTA money. But for the trunk highway specific federal funds, that comes to us via a direct appropriation. And so we are relying on the state legislature to give us additional budget authority to be able to spend that $170 million each year. And I will note that that authority is included in the governor's bill and also both the House and Senate transportation bills currently. Correct. And so a couple other issues that I didn't mention on the previous slide, just the matching needs for the modes. So for aeronautics, there's an additional $60 million each year over the life of this bill. For that program, typically the state or local match is at 10%. So that translates to $6.5 million. On the slide, it's rounded up to $7 million. And then for transit, you can see a higher percentage, still $7 million in total need, but that 36% is a result of the mix of funds. The federal government provides 80% for capital projects, but only 50% for operating funds. And so that's kind of a hybrid need of the two. And then we at MnDOT have also taken a crack at guesstimating how much of those discretionary pots specific to transportation would come to Minnesota. If you look at all of the transportation programs out there, there's over $100 billion of discretionary funding. If we assume that same 2% that Director Minge mentioned, it's $450 to $500 million each year of potential funds coming to Minnesota, with a corresponding over $100 million need for match, assuming 20%. And again, rough estimates, a lot of times for these discretionary programs, that match. We're more competitive the more we provide, so that 20% is actually, could be considered a minimum. Next slide, please. Just, this is an illustrative list. This is by no means comprehensive, but just some of the bigger discretionary programs out there. In some cases, these are existing programs. They've been in effect from previous authorization bills. In most cases, with more money this go around. So infra, there's $14 billion over the next 5 years for that program. That's an existing program. Similarly, there's a local and regional project assistance program that's gone by a variety of names over the previous years. It's been known as RAISE, BUILD, TIGER, essentially all the same thing. There's $7.5 billion there. I will note, a question came up earlier. This program, the grant solicitation came out in, I believe, January, and this is the one so far that has already closed. So the grant applications for that program for this year closed a couple weeks ago. And then there are a couple big ones that are completely new. So there's a bridge investment program with $12.5 billion over the next 5 years, specific to large bridges. There's also a mega projects program with $5 billion. Safe Streets and Roads for All is another $5 billion. So lots of programs out there. In terms of the calendar for when these are upcoming, I believe that is on the next slide. Thank you. So currently, the 3 large programs that have come out with guidance there's 3 of them. They were actually packaged together. And so the federal government, to attempt to make the application process simpler, is treating this like one big grant, but it's 3 separate programs, excuse me. So the infra, which is an existing program, there's $1.55 billion available for this round of solicitation. That's focusing on freight mobility and supply chain bottlenecks. There's another $1 billion in that new mega infrastructure project assistance program for large projects. And then there's another $300 million for rural projects. That's also a new program. And so in total, that's almost $3 billion where we are doing some work right now to identify projects that would fit nicely in those categories and would be competitive. The deadline for submission on all 3 of those is the end of May. So typically, we've been given about 2 months from when that notice of funding comes out to when we have to submit the applications. So it's a very tight window.
Mr. Cage, how does this work with our bonding bill, too? Senator Bach, I mean, this is complicated. Yeah.
And not to make it more complicated, but I believe the next slide will raise some more questions. So as I mentioned, a couple of the larger and completely new programs. So one thing that's been helpful is so far the NOFOs, the Notice of Funding opportunities that have come out, have been existing programs where we have previous experience in applications and kind of have a sense of what's competitive. What's coming up in May are 2 very large programs that are completely new. So that bridge investment program, the $12.5 billion total, so likely $2.5 to $3 billion available in this round. That NOFO should be coming out by the end of May, and we have no experience with that program whatsoever. So that will be an interesting program when that guidance comes out. Similarly, that Safe Streets and Roads for All, that should be coming out in May as well. And I did include a link. There is a helpful calendar on the USDOT website that lists out upcoming NOFOs as they're coming up. So that goes out through, I believe, September at this point. But there's some very large potential programs coming up over the next couple months.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cage. Do we have any questions?
I believe that in the interest of time, I think that's it for, yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. We do still have a half hour of time slotted. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So on slide 8, it says here, the Bridge Investment Program, at least 50% reserved for certain large projects. So what would be those certain large projects that are contemplated here?
Mr. Cage.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, the easiest example that's been brought up numerous times by the federal government as well as locally would be Blatnick.
Would be
the Blatnick Bridge in Duluth.
okay.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yes, okay, so that's the one that's brought up by congressional members, state members, or so on?
Mr.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, correct. When they've been doing press releases for that program and talking about the potential types of bridges, Blatnick has been a bridge that's been brought up numerous times in a variety of settings.
Another question?
Senator Kivmer.
And then 40 million per year for tribal transportation bridges. I'm aware of Minnesota roads and bridges. So could you tell me what tribal transportation bridges would be?
Mr. Cage.
Madam Chair, Senator, so in a variety of these programs, there's funding set aside or dedicated for tribal governments across the country, and so this program is no different. It would be money available for, in this case, bridges within the tribal nations in Minnesota.
Senator Kivmer.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, so we're talking about money set aside exclusively for bridges within a reservation? Is that what you're referring to? Most of our highways are roads that are state highways or county highways or township or city that may exist in a reservation. So how does that, well, maybe that's guidance still coming, but how does that work when you have state, local types of roads that run through a reservation?
Mr. Natterud.
Madam Chair, Senator, there's going to be a lot of cooperation needed to manage this program, every level of government, so this is no different. I'll get back to you with more detail if you'd like it on how that would actually work in the details.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hubinger, with respect specifically to the discretionary grants, does MnDOT currently have any documentation that you could share with the legislature that would illustrate the standards or the plans or guidelines for these various discretionary grants? I mean, we have some nice sound bites in your presentation, but I would be very interested in the details on these various grant programs. What does MnDOT have in terms of documentation you could share with us?
Mr. Natterud-Hubinger.
Madam Chair, Senator Newman, would be happy to share what we do have. For those programs that have existed, we have a more prescribed process. So say that RAISE program as an example, that would be easier to provide more detail. Some of these upcoming or new programs, not so much, but I will be happy to follow up with more detail.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. I'd appreciate it if you would send to me whatever you currently have, and maybe an explanation as to what you see coming, because again, it's the unknown that is bothering me the most. So I'd appreciate that documentation.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, one more
Senator
question.
Kivmer.
Thank you. We have a program here in Minnesota called Corridors of Commerce, which has been very successful. So are these funds eligible to be used in the Corridors of Commerce program? Can they be provide additional funding into that Corridors of Commerce program?
Mr. Natterud-Hubinger.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, it depends. In some of these programs, absolutely, there's some nice overlap. So a program like Infra has some very strong similarities to Corridors of Commerce, and so that would be one program. For a lot of these newer ones, Mega, potentially, that program has some overlap with projects that would score nicely under Corridors of Commerce as well. But for a lot of these, again, we're waiting on more guidance from the federal government, so hard to say for all of them. But yes, absolutely, some of them have overlap.
So question I have is, does MnDOT or other agencies or so on, but I'm focusing in on this one in particular, do they have plans to do that, to put some of these into the structured Corridors of Commerce program?
Mr. Natterud-Hubinger.
Madam Chair and Senator, I think the way it would work would be these would be supplemental funds to help advance Corridors of Commerce type projects. If we got federal funds, it would just reduce the need for state funding.
Madam Chair, the Corridors of Commerce program is really important because it has a really great structure to it and how it takes those interregional, from city to city type of corridors and really focuses on them. And I know Senator Newman's working on some updating of that program as well, but it really balances rural and metro. And I think that it's really important for us to consider that we put those funds into the Corridors of Commerce program. There it has a competitive grant program as well, but also structured and been very, very successful over the last, I would say, 8-10 years or so. Anyway, but it's good to know that that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Senator Nauman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up. You've just indicated that a number of these programs and projects that you're waiting for further guidance from the federal government. What or how does MnDOT intend to address those programs when we adjourn sine die at the May 23rd? If you could explain how MnDOT intends to handle this situation once the legislature is not in session.
Mr. Nadeau-Hoover.
Madam Chair, Senator Newman, I think I'd answer that in two ways. So the most important for the things we know about is getting that budget authority for the federal funds portion in the trunk highway fund. So that's something we absolutely need before session ends. The matching funds that go with it for the formula programs would be number two. But then for all, that includes, even for some of those newer programs where we don't have guidance on what types of projects are eligible, we'd at least have the authority then to spend on those types of projects once we get more information. The discretionary side is more complicated. Those are coming out on a rolling basis. And so we're trying to be in a position where we have some funding available to pursue what does come out over the next, between now and next session. Without knowing much more than that, that's kind of where we are. And then I think there's the question of how we communicate this with all of our stakeholders throughout the off-session time period.
Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, but you understand what you are asking of us, and that would be to appropriate money for MnDOT to spend on programs that don't yet exist or we don't know the standards for those programs. And Madam Chair, I will tell you that's very problematic for me. If I want to support an appropriation, I want to know what a state agency intends to spend the money on. And this isn't the first time that I've heard that explanation, and it certainly isn't Mr. Hubinger fault. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I'm pretty leery of appropriating funds, these would be the matching funds now, to be spent by a state agency when we don't know what you're going to spend the money on. And it's a conundrum for us, because if we don't put the matching funds up, then maybe we lose the program. So I'm really sincerely looking for guidance and help where MnDOT will work with us in some form or fashion to protect us against an appropriation for an unknown program.
Mr. Nadeau-Hoover.
Madam Chair, Senator Newman, absolutely, we are happy to work with you. I think that meeting you proposed for next week would be a great place to start for making sure we're all on the same page. Just to be clear, though, I will say the budget authority for the federal funds is explicitly for the formula funds as we know them to be, and we have a pretty good sense of what those are going to be used for. So that's a little clearer. Same with the match. Most of that match is for formula. Most of that formula is existing programs, and so it would run through our existing STIP, CHIP, MnChip, project selection policy, all of the usual processes. It's the discretionary side where we, to your point, don't know much, and so it's hard to give you any certainty for what projects we're going to apply for, what that guidance will look like, but absolutely willing to work with you to make sure we're all as comfortable as we can be.
And Madam Chair, I'm not nearly as concerned about the formula programs as I am about the discretionary programs. That's wherein lies my most concern.
If we could have Director Minge and Mr. Kelly please come up again, please. Thank you. And while you're doing that, I just received a letter. It's from the White House, but it's dated back January 4th of 2022. It is from the Senior Advisor and Infrastructure Implementation Coordinator, Mitch Landrieu. And he talks about given the success of this model for ARP, he's requesting that we consider appointing a high-level person to serve as the state's own infrastructure implementation coordinator. That's probably better than a czar. And that they are working on a guidebook for states and local governments to better understand key dates and things you can do now to prepare for these programs coming in 2022. Is there an update on that, Director Minge?
Madam Chair, so to the second question about the guidebook, yes, the White House has released a guidebook on the IIJA. It's very long and yet still very high level. That guidebook we've been relying on very heavily in our planning. So, for example, the sums I provided about what we think might be available in the interim, that's based on the dates contained within the guidebook, and we're happy to follow up and share that with the committee. And I think.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I can
Mr.
just add
Herbinger.
something. FHWA, at least for the transportation side, does have a very helpful website. It's just FHWA Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, something simple like that, but they've been very good about putting out new information on a daily basis. That's where the new guidance has come out. So just as an example, even within the last week, one of those new formula programs, the guidance and related fact sheets just came out. And so they're keeping that up to date. It is a really easy to navigate website, so I would just plug that as well.
Okay. And then as far as a coordinator, I would assume that is in the works, since this was a January 4th letter.
So, Madam Chair, I think, I can't speak for specifically what the governor's office plans to do, but certainly we are working with them to assess, to try to coordinate as best as we can across state agencies and assess what the need is and what additional capacity might be necessary. And we will sort of keep you all informed on the plans for additional coordination capacity going forward.
Very good. Mr. Kelly, I do have a question for you, too, on the broadband. There's $100 million, but last year in our capital projects through the ARP, we appropriated $70 million, and I understand that there's $35 million that hasn't even been out yet. Is that correct? And how are we going to utilize that $100 million if we haven't even utilized what we've appropriated last year?
Madam Chair, members, that would be a question for DEED, or the Office of Broadband, the Department of Commerce. Having been the former broadband policy advisor in the governor's office, I think my information would be pretty stale, but I can definitely follow up, and we can get you that information.
Okay. All right. That's a question maybe Senator Sinjin we can drill down on eventually, or Senator Westrom too. Senator Bach, do you have any questions? You've been awfully quiet, and you're a major player in this whole infrastructure money here too.
Madam Chair, I've got so many, I wouldn't know where to start asking them. So I think we're probably got to take some of this offline and figure this out. But time is pretty short. I was just telling Senator Pappas, the governor said in the paper that there wasn't going to be a special session. I'm not as sure as it relates to all of this, I guess. But the call will be his, but seems like the timing is pretty short for all of us. Senator Newman, what's your take?
Senator Newman.
My take is that at an absolute minimum, I anticipate informational hearings in the off-season. I just can't imagine that we're going to have all of the answers necessary to address these issues by the end of this session. Not because we're not willing to do it, it's because the feds haven't told us yet. And so I would agree with Senator Bach. I'm not so sure. I think it'd have to be pretty limited special session to address these issues, but I think it's really problematic, the fact that we're reaching the end of the session and we don't have answers to the questions that we need in order to enact the appropriate legislation.
Thank you. Who was, Senator Sinjin, I have you on my list. Did you have something? And then Senator Pence and Senator Kent?
Yeah, just, thank you, Madam Chair. Just on page 7 there where it talked about rural rural grants, surface transportation grants, and maybe you addressed it, Mr. Hubinger, but is there a definition of rural? I mean, say rural, is it deep rural, or is it outstate, what we might call outstate Minnesota? Do you
Mr.
have thoughts on that?
Hubinger.
Madam Chair, I would have to get back to you on the specifics. Yes, there's absolutely a definition. I believe it's based on U.S. Census, so it'd be outside of the essentially 7-county metro. But I could absolutely follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Friends?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bach and Senator Newman, for raising the question about what we don't know. I'd encourage the committee and the two legislative chambers to look at the things we do know and try to make some responsible decisions so that we don't get caught behind. My concern is that we'll lose out on some of these competitive grants because we've adjourned and are unable to agree. So that's my long-winded way of saying the things we do know are out there, and we can provide matching funds for some of it. And I, can concede there's some stuff we don't know, but I would not want to hold the whole thing up. Let's get the train out of the station. And if we have to make an extra stop after May 23rd, Senator Newman, we'll be there. I'm assuming you're going to keep inviting the ranking minority members to all future finance meetings, too.
Leave
you, Madam
your
Chair.
nameplates there. That's perfect. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually going to follow up on something Senator Newman was talking about, and then Senator Friends got there, too. And this is, I guess, mostly for Director Minge. In terms of when we will get more guidance, does that fall under the heading of the unknown unknowns?
Director Meade?
Madam Chair, Senator, I think it might be a known unknown in that
He just said that, too.
there's guidance coming out all the time, and I think as we approach the end of session, we can work together to hone in on the universe of known and unknown, and how we could position the state to respond, and what sort of checks and balances and limitations might be appropriate.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess part of what I'm asking and what I feel like I'm hearing is, unlike last year in 2021, when we came up to the end of the constitutional session and we knew we were waiting for guidance that would be coming from the feds about the ARP funds fairly soon. And so we took the time to wait for that to come in before we wrapped up our final budget. I get the feeling this is going to be an ongoing thing. So it's not like we'll be able to say, okay, well, we'll come back in July and we'll be able to nail this down until we're back here next January. So just in terms of managing expectations and what we need to create for ourselves before we get out of here in 3 weeks, I just think we need to be prepared for extended uncertainty, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, and on that uncertainty, it brings up a point, Senator Kent, is Director Meade, on some of these matching funds, for example, I believe the EVs are $3.4 million per year, and that was, I believe, fully funded for the 5 years. But the wastewater was only for the 2 years. What was the method of thinking on who got the full 5-year allocation and who only got just a 1 year or 2 year?
So, Madam Chair, that's really a function of the funding source for the state match. So for the EV charging infrastructure programs, we're relying on general fund appropriations versus the water infrastructure programs. The recommendation is to use general obligation bonds, and we only authorize those sort of for the first year, and because of the restrictions associated with general obligation bonds, we don't want to authorize too much at one time so that the authorizations align with the anticipated spending dates.
So that would be helpful to have that maybe a little more clear. I understand the state match, but I don't understand on your sheet on page 7, where the funding source is coming from. That might be nice for these chairs to have what their obligations are going forward and the reason why.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, we're happy to follow up with the committee. On slide 10 is a summary of everything, specifying what's from the general fund and what's using GO bonds. But we will follow up with sort of in what bill areas, because there are some things using general fund cash that are part of the governor's capital budget recommendations as well. But we can help tease that apart of what's the funding source, where is
Right.
it included, and why are we choosing 2 or 3 years instead of,
Right.
4 or 5?
So it's not fair to say, or correct to say, if it's general fund, it was funded for 5 years on this, what we have in front of us at this point.
I think that's correct. So for example, the State Competitiveness Fund that Mr. Kelly spoke to and described as sort of a bridge to the budget year.
I see, okay, okay. That's very good. Okay, any further questions, members? Well, I so want to thank you for your time, Dr. Minge. Mr. Major, thank you very much for being here. Commissioner Showalter, if there are no further questions, meeting is adjourned.